Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special installment of I Watch Something and Talk About It. Now, this is not a TED Excellence, just so you know. This is not actually a TED Talk. This is instead a presentation given by Robin DiAngelo, author of White Fragility, which has become quite the modern coffee table book Bible for the modern day of, I don't know, racial understanding. The book's been out for several years now, but it's gained more popularity and, I guess, relevance in the last several months with all of the protests and George Floyd and racial tensions and so on hitting a peak. And while I've done a couple of videos in the past that featured Dr. DiAngelo, I've never actually looked all that closely at the contents of the book itself. And so while I may be familiar with some of the ideas that come from the book, I don't really know much about what's in the book. So I thought this would be educational, both for myself and perhaps you, to know from the source, what is the deal and what is the theory of white fragility? What are the arguments? What is the evidence, if there is any, and does it make any sense? Now, obviously, I have a suspicion that most of it won't, but I'd rather know than just assume. Because, you know, there's that phrase. That phrase being, hi, who's joining me today? Ivor Singatorix, hello. This is Kyle, hello. Matt Barnes, hello. That one servant of Satania, hello. Pink Hollow, the driving ape man, hello. Absolutely degenerate, hello. Johnny Hellcat, hello. No room for squares, hello. Let's see. Brad Young, hello. And then St. Michael, hello. Who else? Kay Scholl, hello. L. Wolf, hello. Keeverdam, hello. Black Belt for Christ, hello. Chaos X, hello. Kit Fox, hello. And then chat jumped, because of course it did. Brian has opinions, formerly the Broken Baller, hello. Shio Gorath, hello. Havoc Vladimirovich Stalinov, hello. Heleno? Vladimir? Good God. Havoc Vladimirovich Stalinov, hello. Failure B, hello. Gunfox 61, hello. Dark Alile, hello. Crimson Tiger, hello. Attack Alpaca, hello. Big Assassin 80, hello. Let's see. Frosted Glass, hello. Joys of Sorrow, hello. Check Your Logic, hello. Corey Suzuki, hello. John Smith, hello. Rick Ashbringer, hello. Danny Boy, hello. Belias Fire, hello. Leo Prime 75, hello. Prosaic Dreams in Blue, hello. Emperor W.R. Costin, hello. Bruno Montiero, hello. No Name, hello. And Mickey T.C., hello. All right, so yeah, let's just jump into this. So I'm only going to go. I'm going to go for an hour and a half at maximum. Okay, with two caveats. One, I get bored before then, and I decide that I've heard enough. Or sometime between now and an hour and a half from now, something about the talk or where we are compels me to continue for a little while. We'll see. But I don't think that an hour and a half is going to be too little of time to take a look at this. So all that being said, going to start off with a couple of seconds here of sound. You guys tell me if you could hear it, and then we will continue. So the presentation is entitled White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Here we go. Woo! You guys hear that? Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. A friend holds this book as a Bible, so I thought to read of this as well. I think my brain started bleeding. Yeah, no, like I said, I have heard about or had reference to me many, many times in the last couple of years, this book. So, like I said, let's hear it from the source, from the author, and figure out what's going on. KSX says, woo-hoo. Big Assassin says, good to go. Havoc says, woo! Woo-woo! Sounds good, says everybody. All right, let's go.
Thank you so much. Okay, that was such a rush.
I can imagine. Yeah. It's really exciting getting praised for being a racist.
Before I launch in, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to read a little bit, riff a little bit, kind of guide you along with some slides. But I do want to reiterate that this talk is happening on the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples.
Of course it is. In fact, I don't know if there's a place you could go in this country and give a talk that doesn't. And that has to do with what? If that is so important, should you really be there, standing there with your whiteness?
And I believe very, very deeply that if we don't know our history, if we cannot trace the past into the present, we cannot explain current conditions in ways that are transformative rather than victim blaming. And
if we don't understand our history, do you understand the history of separating people and assessing people's character on the basis of their skin color? Do you know the history of that by any chance? I'm just curious.
And I think today it's very, very clear when we see struggles around water rights at Standing Rock. The Duwamish yet again denied federal recognition, which denies treaty rights and sovereignty. These struggles are never separated from the present.
Well, if they are things taking place in the present, like, litigation or controversy, then you're right. They're in the present. Congratulations. Yeah. Also, I believe that I can't remember exactly. I believe this talk was given a couple of years ago, so there might be references to things that are a little out of date now. I don't remember how long ago this was actually given, but thank you, tall person. Hoyal just got home from work and we'll watch in full later. Happy Slinky Day, everybody. The Slinky. Let's see. I try to sing the Slinky song in my head, but I end up singing the Log song from Ren and Stimpy. I won't regale you with it because I'll probably do it badly, but look up the Log song and look up the Slinky song. They're similar.
At the same time, a piece of white fragility is that white people are not taught their history.
White people are not taught their history. Okay. And white people as a demographic have a singular shared history then? Is that it? Interesting. Thank you, I, for Singatorix. Quote, this land belonged to the Indians, unquote. That means you should give it back. No, that means we should invite the rest of the world to live on it too. If Robin DiAngelo felt that strongly about it, she wouldn't live in this country. She would see this country as tainted, as stolen. She wouldn't want to contribute to that history of oppression and that system of theft and so on. But she's fine. She'll still show up on stage, give her speeches, travel around the country. That's fine. She'll just talk about how terrible it is, but not actually live up to her own apparent rhetoric. Anyway.
We don't know our history.
Yeah.
So I want to acknowledge that.
Okay.
I want to position myself, of course, as a white person.
Oh, well, I'm glad you did so. I wouldn't have known otherwise.
And I'm talking to addressing a very, very specific dynamic. This is arguably the most complex, nuanced social dilemma since the beginning of this country.
Wow, really? This is the most nuanced, complex, and you've deciphered it. You've cracked the code. All right. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. She would scribe, but she has a book to sell. Yeah, I know. I mean, you got to be pragmatic about these things. You can't just stand on your principles. You have to, set them aside to make a buck off of telling people to hate themselves and telling people to hate other people. It's one of those things.
And there are myriad roads in, and all of them are essential.
Mm-hmm.
But so consistently left off the table is whiteness.
Oh, okay.
Right? So we often learn about this group and that group and their struggles and their triumphs and their heroes and heroines.
You mean groups or you mean demographics? It's almost like a nervous twitch now. Whenever somebody in one of these speeches says groups, I have to wonder if they're actually talking about what they say they're talking about. But, okay.
And yet we don't ask ourselves struggles and triumphs in relation to whom, right? And so,
okay.
Again, I'm going to focus on white folks and white people.
You are? Really? I mean, that's amazing, given the title of your book and how you had to tell us that you're positioning yourself as white. What does that even mean? Like, if she didn't say that, if she didn't say those magic words, would she not be white, or would she be taking herself out of the equation if she didn't state that? I mean, sometimes some of these statements sound more like incantations than they do statements of fact or anything.
I do use humor.
You do? I can't wait!
And I want to say a little bit about why I use humor. Some of it is my style.
You know, it's kind of like a magician telling you how the trick works before they show it. I do use humor. Like, why would you say that? Just be funny or just do your best. Why would you predicate your presentation by saying, I use humor? Just, it's so bizarre.
And also because there's so much tension and so much anxiety and so much charge and so much defensiveness and on and on.
Yeah, you know, that does happen when people are accused of being inherently flawed because of their skin color. I don't know why that is.
For white people around race, that we can, when we begin to get challenged, we can shut down really quickly or glaze over or tune out. And all of those, of course, function to protect our positions and hold our worldviews in place.
Well, I suppose that's one way of looking at it. It could also be justified outrage at being accused of something that they're not actually guilty of, or being told that somehow because of their skin color, they're inherently morally corrupt or something. You know, it could be that. No, it's just defensiveness so we can retain our power play or something. Yeah, because we all have power when we're being called racist or flawed or inherently weak or something because of our skin color.
And so the laughter can help release some of that.
Do you need to explain this? Really? You need to tell us this? Again, the magician analogy. You're telling us ahead of time, like, just so you know, in case you feel defensive, I'm going to use humor to try to sort of, you know, soften the blow a little bit. So when I say something funny, it's only meant to take away the strength of your own defensiveness. So what the hell?
If we can laugh at this, and mock it a little bit, to be direct.
Oh, don't worry. I'll be doing plenty of mocking as we go, I have a feeling, if I haven't already proven that.
It can help us then step back and not take ourselves so seriously and hopefully, again, open it up.
Not take ourselves seriously. Well, are white people fragile or aren't they? Are they inherently racist or aren't they? How much more serious a topic can you get than racial discrimination inherent to people on the basis of their skin color? I don't know why you wouldn't want to take that seriously if you're being serious about what you're saying.
And I want to say that this is killing people of color, right? This is very, very serious.
But we're not supposed to take ourselves seriously all the time, right? Even though people's lives are at stake? I'm confused. Should I be laughing while people are dying? Is that healthy?
So my humor is not meant to trivialize that, but it is a strategy, one of many that I use in order to try to air this out and open it up.
You don't need to explain that. I mean, seriously, it's so bizarre that you would take the time to explain the use of humor in talking about serious subjects to make the medicine go down a little smoother, that kind of thing. Also, she said, trivialize that. I'm having flashbacks to a Star Trek episode.
So I want to start by reading from the beginning.
Yay!
White people in North America live in a society that is deeply separate and unequal by race, and white people are the beneficiaries of that separation and inequality.
Okay, so a statement of fact. All right, back that up.
As a result, we are insulated from racial stress at the same time that we come to feel entitled to and deserving of our advantage.
Racial stress. So the only way to be a healthy white person is to be experiencing racial stress, because not experiencing racial stress is actually a wrongdoing.
Given how seldom we experience racial discomfort in a society we dominate, we haven't had to build our racial stamina.
Racial stamina. Okay, so again, unless I'm living perpetually under a cloud of racial stress or racial tension of some kind, then I'm enjoying the benefits of being white, and that is wrong. So the healthy way to exist is experiencing racial stress, because the absence of racial stress says something derogatory about me as a person, that I'm insulated from it. Is that what I'm to understand?
Socialized into a deeply internalized sense of superiority that we either are unaware of or can never admit to ourselves, we become highly fragile in conversations about race.
Okay, so I'm experiencing a sense of superiority that could be invisible, could be intangible, could be completely unawares to me, but I'm still experiencing it. I'm still benefiting from it. So even if there's nothing out of the ordinary to suggest it, it's still there. It's still present, and I'm still infected with it. Okay, so even in the absence of evidence to the contrary, it's still there no matter what. Okay, got it.
We consider a challenge to our racial worldviews as a challenge to our very identities as good moral people.
Well, challenge to our racial worldviews or being accused of being inherently racist is a challenge to our character and as moral people, because racism is not exactly a moral position. So, yeah, if you say that I am inherently flawed on the basis of my skin color, plus I am benefiting and de facto imposing some sort of white supremacy on others because of my skin color, therefore I'm contributing to a racist, oppressive system, yeah, you're saying something about my character, that I am thoughtlessly moving through the world and harming people. And as you said earlier, leading up to people dying simply on the basis of my existing. So I think I'd take that personally. I think that might be a critique of my character outside of any evidence, but what do I know? Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and scribbles. Hello, Kyle.
Thus, we perceive any attempt to connect us to the system of racism as an unsettling and unfair moral offense.
And it would be, unless you have evidence that backs it up. I mean, you're going to call me fragile. You're going to call me a racist. Okay, prove it. Me, not the grand abstract of white people, but me, individual me. How am I fragile? How am I a racist for not particularly enjoying someone saying that I am flawed because of my skin color, or that I'm an unknowing contributor to people dying simply by existing? Back up what you say. I mean, it's easy to just make these grand, glittering generalizations and not have to back it up. But unfortunately, when it comes down to racism, when it comes down to an ideology, you're going to have to go on a case-by-case basis. Because if you start saying the entire demographic is ill, you're being the racist.
The smallest amount of racial stress is intolerable. The mere suggestion that being white has meaning often triggers a range of defensive responses.
Mm-hmm.
And these include emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt,
Yes.
and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and withdrawal from the stress-inducing situation.
Okay, so if I'm confronted with some accusation or assessment of me on the basis of my skin color, if I remain silent, that's a sign of my defensiveness. If I argue back, that's a sign of my defensiveness. If I leave the conversation, that's a sign of my defensiveness. So the only correct action is agreeable acquiescence. Anything else just proves the accusation being levied against me. Interesting. Got it. Thank you, Johnny Stoffel. The man in the moon is white. Well, he's got gray spots. Who knows? And actually, the moon's really gray. It's actually gray skin. So, you know, and I know because I'm here right now. I mean, you know, the overlay I'm using might show off a chaotic wasteland and everything, but you know, I'm still on the moon, sort of.
These responses work to reinstate white equilibrium as they repel the challenge, return our racial comfort, and maintain our dominance within the racial hierarchy.
The Reich. Was that a Freudian slip? Maintain our dominance in the Reich? Yeah, okay. The racial hierarchy. Okay. Thank you, Lancelot 652. It would be nice to just word vomit into a book and make $1 million. Yeah, and some people end up doing that. Some people end up doing that, for better or for ill or for neutrality, like the Twilight books or 50 Shades of Grey. We're not talking like really deep levels of whatever, but somebody just happened to hit upon the right words at the right time in the right market, and boom. Now, granted, Robin DiAngelo's book here was very popular in the fringe, super lefty side of things several years ago, but it just came back, roaring back into prominence because of the recent events. And she's on talk shows, and sales of her book went through the roof. And it's being set aside right next to How to Be an Anti-Racist by, Ibram X. Kendi, who I did a TEDx on like last week or whatever. And I'm as these books and as these quote unquote experts on these subjects come out, I think I might make it a routine to try to find some comprehensive examination of their thoughts, their theories, and or their book, just to have an idea of what all the hubbub's about.
I conceptualize this process as white fragility. Though white fragility is triggered by discomfort and anxiety, it is born of superiority and entitlement.
Okay, so someone being defensive about being called flawed and or evil, knowingly or otherwise, gets defensive, that shows that they're fragile because of their skin color, but also because they're superior. Because when you feel superior to everybody else, obviously then you're also weak. Okay.
White fragility is not weakness per se.
Oh.
In fact, it is a powerful means of white racial control and the protection of white advantage.
Oh.
In my early days of work of what was then termed a diversity trainer, I was taken aback by how angry and defensive so many white people became at the suggestion that they were connected to racism in any way.
Did you happen to do that same routine just as an experiment on any other demographics? Any other racial demographics? I mean, did you do any research where you had a conversation with a white person, had that exact same conversation with a black person, had that exact same conversation with a Native American person, had that exact same conversation with a Latino person, exact same conversation, and on and on and on? Did you ever experiment with that and see how people react to being accused of being part of a racist conspiracy? See what their reactions were? Do you think it's an inherent white reaction, or do you think it might be an inherent reasonable person reaction? I really got to wonder. Like, so if someone's black, if someone's Asian, and they have that same accusation levied at them, are they cool with it? Are they agreeable with it? Do they just nod and say, yeah, I'm part of that? I mean, what is the alternative here? If white people do that, then no one else does? Thank you, Ebony Williams. Yo, and is that a burrito? Yo burrito? I think, I can't tell. Mine eyes might deceive me, but if that is a burrito, I mean, I haven't had lunch yet. Maybe I'll have a burrito. Thank you, Ebony.
The very idea that they would be required to attend a workshop on racism outraged them.
Required to attend a workshop about racism. Why would I want to go workshop racism? It is a burrito. Yo, burrito. Unless the burrito emoji has some other secret meaning that I'm not aware of. Because I don't necessarily know the code for all the emojis these days. I am rather old and seasoned, as they say.
They entered the room angry and made that feeling clear to us throughout the day as they slammed their notebooks down on the table, refused to participate in exercises, and argued against any and all points.
Well, were those points saying that white people are inherently fragile and or racist? I mean, I don't know. Like I say, why don't you do an experiment? Why don't you do a workshop where you take a bunch of black people and you have a presentation that says that because of their skin color, they are a particular, and find your negative connotation, fragile or angry or I don't even know, corruptible, whatever. Pick your racial demographic, align it with a derogatory term, put them together. Have a mandatory class where you talk to that demographic about that thing and see what they say. See what they say. Do you think it's inherent to white people that they'd be, a little irritated for being called out and assessed on the basis of their skin color? You really think it's just white people that do that? I don't know. I mean, I honestly have no idea because I don't know my history since I'm white. So do you think there was ever a time ever before now where there was, I don't know, some kind of uprising, some kind of, I don't know, some kind of societal shift because people were being treated differently on the basis of their skin color? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know my history. I'm white, I don't know anything. Thank you, chat more. The only reason someone would be angry at an accusation of something horrible is because it's true, obviously. Yes, of course. My denial of witchcraft is just more evidence of my corruption by Satan, don't you know? And thank you, Ebony Williams. No secret, I'm just hungry and want to share it with everyone. Yay! Oh, now we got pizza and another pizza. I'm hungry too. I haven't had anything to eat today. It's like I wasn't really that hungry this morning, and then I got ready for the show, and when I get ready for the show, I get a little anticipatory, a little excited, and that sort of suppresses my hunger. So after this, I'm going to have something to eat. Maybe I'll have a burrito.
I couldn't understand their resentment or disinterest in learning more about such a complex social dynamic as racism.
You couldn't understand. You're white. Why couldn't you understand it? You understand white people, right? Because you're white. Why wouldn't you understand someone being fragile while being white? Why was that so difficult for you to get? Are you immune to those thoughts? Does your skin color somehow not affect you? How can you set yourself and position yourself as a white person if you don't understand how white people think? Obviously, since all white people think the same way. I'm confused.
These reactions were especially perplexing when there were few or no people of color in their workplace, and they had the opportunity to learn from my co-facilitators of color.
Learn what? Being accused of being fragile and racist? Would it matter what the color of the person saying it is if the accusation is still incorrect or unjustified at best? What does that got to do with anything?
I assumed that in these circumstances, an educational workshop on racism would be appreciated. After all, didn't the lack of diversity indicate a problem, or at least suggest that some perspectives were missing?
No. I mean, you might assume so, but one does not lead to the other, unless we're going for the God of the gaps theory of statistical analysis. There is a disparity of demographic X and demographic Y. Therefore, discrimination. If you operate under that theory, I guess that's you, but you don't think for everyone. Thankfully, not yet. Thank you, Ebony Williams. Again, has no one told this author or this speaker that racism is taught? Well, I mean, what is a mandatory class on racism supposed to do except teach people that they are racist? I mean, that's where it comes from. Oh, but, she says that, white people inherently don't have to deal with racial tension, so they grow up with an inherent sense of superiority since they don't know any different, and therefore they're racist, even if they don't know that they're racist. and they're contributing to a system of oppression simply for existing. And so we have to have mandatory classes in a company to teach people about the racism that they inherently have, even if they don't want to admit it, just so that they know that, really that they're racist. And by the way, buy my book. Buy my book. Buy my book. Ebony Williams, so it's not enough to say I'm not racist? No, you can't. You can't. As we learned from Ibram X. Kendi, there are three scenarios. I'm not a racist, or I am a racist, or I am an anti-racist. And to say I'm not a racist is actually inherently invalid because racism permeates every part of our society. So there really only are two statuses to be in. Either you are acknowledging that you are a racist actively, or you are confessing that you are a racist and you feel bad about it and work to highlight situations where racism can be defeated, even though you're inherently practicing racism. Anyway, if you want to understand all that stuff, I recommend you go back. If you haven't seen it, Ebony, you really should watch it. Anybody else, go back a couple of TED Excellences to the thumbnail that says, good is not good enough, or isn't good enough, and watch that one because it is very informative about the latest theory for this kind of stuff, and that is the concept of anti-racism. But that is an aside. Let's continue.
Or that the participants might be undereducated about race because of scant cross-racial interactions. It took me several years to see beneath these reactions.
Really? Several years? But weren't you a white person that whole time? Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. Tip for the critic reference. Aha! Somebody got it. Thank you, Johnny. And thank you again, Ebony. I honestly weep for the future of academia. At least in the soft sciences, sociology, psychology, and so on, as this stuff gets more and more rooted into how people are told the world works or how they're supposed to view other people or assess other people's behavior through a filter of, well, what color's their skin? I mean, if you give somebody if you gave Robin DiAngelo a psychological profile of someone based on a conversation or something, or based on interactions, but left out everything dealing with any indication of race or gender, I'd be very curious to know how she would assess that person on the basis of the actual psychology versus knowing how she should assess their behavior on the basis of race. And if she did somehow find a way to qualify it differently, what do you think that would make her? I know, it's low-hanging fruit, but all the same.
At first, I was intimidated by them, and they held me back and kept me careful and quiet. But over time, I began to see what lay beneath this anger and resistance to discuss race or listen to people of color.
Okay, well, you combine a few things there. Resist discussions of race. Do you mean discussions about race, or do you mean accusations of racial fragility and or racial superiority, imposing those notions onto people, whether you have evidence for that or not? Because those are two different things. And then interacting with people of different races or whatever. How are these two things inherently connected? Unless, of course, you're suggesting that people are inherently racist and full stop. You wouldn't be doing that, though, right?
I observed consistent responses from a variety of participants. For example, many white participants who lived in white suburban neighborhoods and had no sustained relationships with people of color were absolutely certain that they held no racial prejudice or animosity.
How is any of that evidence that they do? How are those circumstances alone evidence that they do? I hope you tell us, because I'm curious to know, how do those circumstances inherently equate to someone having racial animosity? Thank you, I, for Singatorix. I heard this morning that Black people epigenetically inherit the memories and trauma of slavery / Jim Crow. Does that also apply to victims of commies? I've heard about epigenetics. I don't know much about it. And so I don't know how much of it is, true science and how much of it is conspiracy theory. It's sort of like quantum physics or quantum mechanics or something. You can hear somebody use the phrase quantum physics to explain a whole bunch of crazy stuff. and it doesn't actually do that. So you might be joking. I have no idea, but I've heard various things like that in the past. Like, the traumas of the past affect us today, the memories of our ancestors, and so on. There may be some kind of truth to that in the sense of physical changes or genetic changes over time because of experiences or something. I don't know. I'm an English major, not a science major.
Other participants simplistically reduced racism to a matter of nice people versus mean people.
It depends, I guess. My grandmother is decidedly a racist, but she's not. Well, no, she's actually a pretty terrible person. I'm trying to think of a nice. Can there be a nice racist? There can be a lovable asshole type racist. If you think of like the movie Gran Torino, Clint Eastwood's character in that movie, he was a racist, but he was a lovable, cantankerous asshole. So, thank you, Frank Hubbard IV. She's not batshit crazy. You're racist. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm rubber and you're glue. Yeah, all right.
Most appeared to believe that racism ended in 1865.
Really? You had a room full of grown adults, I'm assuming grown adults, and they thought racism was a law. Is that what they thought, or is that what you're projecting onto them as far as like legalized slavery? These are different things. Racism is a thought process, is an ideology. Ideologies don't just disappear because of legislation that tries to tramp down on the effects of those ideologies or the outcomes of those ideologies. So really, your participants thought racism ended in 1865? Really? Wow. If I had the bingo card out, I'd be circling anecdote that probably didn't happen.
With the end of enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
There was both knee-jerk defensiveness about any suggestion that being white had meaning and a refusal to acknowledge any advantage to being white.
Person by person. You have to go person by person. You're making assessments of people, entire demographics on the basis of race, and accusing them or branding them with certain behaviors, certain outcomes, and so on. Assumptions made on the basis of their skin color. I don't know how much clearer it can be made to you from your own words, but that is what you are doing and promoting. So if you're reading a book called Black Fragility, standing on that stage, what do you think the outcome would be of that accusation? Thank you, Point Curation. I'll watch the start later. Nice to hear you live. Oh, thank you, Point. My Kermit the Frog's bigger brother voice and or watered down Jordan Peterson, depending on who's talking or who's listening, I guess. Anyway.
And over time, I began to see what I think of as the pillars of whiteness,
Ooh.
The unexamined beliefs that prop up our racial responses.
Have I heard this before? That sounds really familiar. Like I said, I've done like two videos in the past that featured Robin DiAngelo. Neither of them were directly about white fragility, like the book. The pillars of... Maybe I've heard this before. Let's find out.
I could see the power of the belief that only bad people were racist, as well as how individualism allowed white people to exempt themselves from the forces of socialization.
Okay, well, how do you define bad? Okay, someone could be a racist their entire life, but never hurt anybody, never demonstrated any particular way. They don't commit any crimes, law-abiding citizen, work every day, raise a family, and so on. And be a total racist. Are they wrong in their thinking? Well, by my estimate, yes, I suppose so. Are they a bad person? As compared to what? I generally consider someone who's racist as being ignorant, like my grandmother. Okay, I'll take my grandmother, for example, because she's the closest person that I know that is demonstrably a racist. Of course, she's also like 93 or something at this point, so whatever. Anyway, my grandmother There's a lot to admire about my grandmother. She grew up in the toughest era you could possibly imagine in our country's history, period, to be a poor person. She grew up during the Depression and the Dust Bowl. She was a war wife during World War II. I mean, and she raised a family. I mean, whatever else that she might have done, she raised my mother to be the saint that she is, thankfully, much unlike her own mother. And you know, she's never hurt anybody. She never committed a crime. She's never, so as a person, she's relatively harmless, and she's lived a relatively productive life, even in some aspects, maybe an admirable one, depending on what you're talking about. But she's a mean lady. She's always been a mean lady. She's always been an absolute bitch to people. Nobody likes her. Nobody liked her before she became super old and crotchety. Nobody really likes her now. And my mother is the saint that she is, that she takes care of my grandmother in her later years, despite the fact that she treated my mother like absolute shit most of her life. Okay, but she's a racist. I mean, that doesn't inherently make her a bad person. The way she treats other people makes her a bad person. And if she were actively treating people badly because of her racist thoughts, then I suppose that would also be indicative of that. But is she a bad person? I don't particularly like her, but I know worse people out there who aren't even racist. That's not forgiving racism, but then racism really only matters when you do something about it to someone else. But the accusation is that we're all inherently racist because we're white, whether we're doing anything or not that could be actively considered racist action or thought or whatever. Bad people? What do you mean by bad? I don't know. I'm trying to suss this out, and I'm probably just flailing at this point. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. In the introduction of the book, she admitted to generalizing. I'm guessing she's leaving that part out of the reading. I don't think she said generalizing yet. I don't think she's made that admission.
I could see how we are taught to think about racism only as discrete acts committed by individual people rather than as a complex, interconnected system.
Right. So again, you're going to ignore an examination of individuals and individual actions and instead categorize everybody under one umbrella and make a broad accusation of everyone on the basis of skin color. Okay. Got it.
And in light of so many white expressions of resentment toward people of color, I realized that we see ourselves as entitled to and deserving of more than people of color deserve. I saw our investment in a system that serves us.
Investment in a system that serves us. Okay. So, golly, I could think of some real world examples where I've seen a lot of disparate outcomes for people, not on the basis of their skin color, but on the basis of their decisions and their choices in life. And they're all white. So how does that work exactly?
I also saw how hard we worked to deny all this and how defensive we became when these dynamics were named.
Deny all this. Yes, you make a broad accusation of people. Someone says, that doesn't apply to me. Oh, well, now. That's the problem right there, isn't it? Doubting Thomas.
In turn, I saw how our defensiveness maintained the racial status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And none of the white people that I identify, whose actions I describe in this book, would identify as racist.
Really? You don't say? Huh. Interesting. So everyone denied that they're racist. Okay.
In fact, I think they would most likely identify as racially progressive and vehemently deny any complicity with racism.
Which is obviously a confession of racism in a backwards way, correct?
Yet all of their responses illustrate white fragility and how it holds racism in place.
Right. They get defensive, or they stay silent, or they extricate themselves from the conversation because they don't want to deal with it, or they don't have enough friends of color for your liking, right? These are all demonstrations of white fragility, which of course then indicates white supremacy, whether they know it or not, because they don't necessarily have to acknowledge it, but it's still there because they're white. Can anyone who's white not possess white fragility? I mean, that's a question I'd really like to ask Dr. D'Angelo. What would a white person who is not experiencing or expressing white fragility look like? What would that person have to do or say? What would be the condition of their thoughts or actions that would prove to her that you have a white person who is not under the spell of this notion? Or is it just inherent? And if it is inherent, what does that say about the theory?
These responses spur the daily frustrations and indignities people of color endure from white people who see themselves as open-minded and thus not racist.
Okay, so all people of color experiencing dignities from white people all the time because white people are inherently fragile / superior, and people who aren't white are inherently victimized and undignified by white people who are fragile and superior. Okay.
This book is intended for us.
No. This book is intended for you. This book is intended for you. This is one of the grandest and most successful virtue signals ever of how I'm really an enlightened white person. All the white people are evil and need to learn how evil they are. And please buy my book and pay me for telling you how awful you are. So you can show this book on your bookshelf or on your coffee table so that anyone coming to your house knows that you know how awful you are, and they don't have to question whether or not you know that you're a racist because you're already confessing that you're a racist, even if you wouldn't actually be a racist by anything you've ever done. Just so no one can accuse you of being a racist without you already having sort of preemptively confessed it, sort of, kind of.
For white progressives who so often, despite our conscious intentions, make life so difficult for people of color.
So even people who do nothing but champion causes of equality or want equal rights and so on and so forth, even the more liberal progressives are inherently fragile because they're white. So political or social ideology has nothing to do with it. Your intentions, your words, your thoughts, your actions are irrelevant because at the end of the day, you're still white. Okay.
I believe that white progressives cause the most daily damage to people of color.
Wow.
And I define a white progressive as any white person who thinks he or she is not racist.
If I think I'm not racist, I'm a white progressive, and I'm doing damage because I think I'm not racist. This aligns very well with anti-racism in that to say I'm not racist is an act of denial because racism is inherent, racism is pervasive, racism is the default. We are surrounded by racism. You cannot deny it. Denying racism in yourself is like saying the earth is not a sphere. It just is. You're just racist. It's just a fact. Unavoidable, true, hard fact. The earth is a sphere. Everyone is racist. These two things are on the exact same level of truth in our reality. Now, thank you, Chat Mort, for the thinking emoji.
Or is less racist, or is in the choir, or already gets it. White progressives can be the most difficult for people of color because to the degree that we think we have it, we're going to put all of our energy into making sure you think that we have it, and none of it into what we need to be doing for the rest of our lives, right?
Well, I'm backing up a few seconds because I think I'm in pausing it there a second ago. I think I missed something, so I'm going to back up just slightly. I want to get that whole comment again.
Progressives who so often, despite our conscious intentions, make life so difficult for people of color. I believe that white progressives cause the most daily damage to people of color. And I define a white progressive as any white person who thinks he or she is not racist, or is less racist, or is in the choir, or already gets it. White progressives can be the most difficult for people of color because to the degree that we think we have it, we're going to put all of our energy into making sure you think that we have it, and none of it into what we need to be doing for the rest of our lives, right?
Okay, when she says have it, I think she means alternating the phrase I get it, as in I get what racism is, I get it, I'm not racist, and so on. Okay, so the more that you get it, have it, whatever, the more you're going to present that to other people, that you understand that you get it, and it being that racism is bad, I guess. And that makes you a white progressive. But if you do anything to express the fact that you're not racist, or say that you're not racist, or do something that would indicate that you don't hold race as a value factor in other people, that does damage to people of color, because and I'm really trying to complete the thought here that got all the applause, because I'm not sure I get that. So so is it a methinks thou doth protest too much kind of thing? Like the more I say I'm totally not racist, you're like, covering up for the fact that you probably are? Maybe? Is that it? Even if you're doing nothing that would indicate that, but because you're white and quote unquote progressive, then I'm trying, guys. I'm really trying.
White progressives do indeed uphold and perpetrate racism, but our defensiveness and certitude make it virtually impossible to explain to us how we do so.
Okay, so white people are all inherently fragile. White conservatives are obviously racist just because of their political, flowchart. White progressives are unknowingly racist and adversariously racist because they oppose the notion that they are racist, which is just, again, to deny something is to show something is true, right? To resist is to prove, or to resist is to demonstrate, whatever the phrase is. I am not a witch.
So I'm pretty sure I'm speaking to a room filled with white progressives.
and so I'm telling all of you that you're all racist, and you're laughing and clapping. How much of a power trip must it be to stand on a stage and tell an audience full of people who have come there to listen to you talk, to clap and laugh at being accused of being terrible people, to have terrible thoughts, to assess people on the basis of race, whether they want to admit it or not? That is honestly amazing to me. It really is. I mean, it is the kind of con, it's the kind of grift that you can only dream of, is to be invited in and paid to tell people that they're awful, and them loving you for it.
So let me just be clear. You are not the choir.
What do you mean they're not the choir? Maybe I missed something. Not the choir?
There is no choir. I am not the choir.
Is this a reference to the phrase preaching to the choir? Honestly, I'm not sure what she means.
When I say there is no choir, it's because my learning will never be finished. And this moment I think I'm the choir, I think I'm going to be done, and I'm going to have certitude.
You don't have certitude right now? You put out a book called White Fragility. You give us the introduction where you say white people are inherently this, 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 and this. All white people are this. White progressives are that. And you're not demonstrating certitude? Really? God, I can't even imagine what certitude must look like in your world then.
I often joke, but on some levels, it's kind of true.
Well, all humor is based in truth.
When I first applied to be that diversity trainer back in the early 90s, I thought, well, of course I'm qualified to lead discussions on racism. I'm a vegetarian.
Okay. You know, that might have landed better if she hadn't started out the talk by telling us that she was going to use humor. It's kind of a spoiler alert. It also says that her humor is probably pretty broken, but what do I know?
How could I be racist?
Yeah, I don't know. How could you be? Oh, that's right. You're white. You're white. That's why. That's how. Thank you, Andrew Joyner. It's a treatment without a cure. Yeah, it is an infinite goal. You know, self-discovery, researching racism, telling people that they're awful, and selling them a book. It is an infinite goal with infinite returns on investment.
Now, I would need to be vegan today, but you know, in the 90s, that was pretty alternative, right? I even got called a communist once when I said, no, I'm a vegetarian.
Imagine that, being called a communist for trying to make everybody align with your one way of thinking and feel terrible about themselves. Oh, imagine that. Thank you, Joe Fapps. Don't diversity jobs pay a crap load in like colleges or big companies? Oh yeah, diversity and inclusion executives or diversity, equity, and inclusion officers in companies and such, they are highly sought positions to have in your company for various reasons. One, you're a company who's a true believer in the notion that simple visual aesthetic diversity equals good. It's also necessary for avoiding a certain amount of legal liability or having some kind of insulation as an argument if you have any cases come your way of accusations of sexual or racial discrimination. You can say, well, we have an entire department working on diversity in our company, so it's not any, if this person thinks that that's what happened to them, it can't be any conscious thought on our part because look here, we have a diversity and inclusion officer. And yeah, they get paid a lot to do, I don't know. I have done profiles and videos on a plethora of diversity and inclusion officers over the years. And the one thing that is true about all of them, it doesn't matter what they look like, it's always that they're never quite sure what the definition of diversity is. There's no playbook, they'll say, because it's different from person to person, company to company. Well, if it has no definition, then I guess you can never be accused of not doing your job, which is an amazing place to be if that is your job.
But, you know, my point is I just thought it was all about open-mindedness and alternativeness. And let me just say that, you know, I love Seattle, and everything I learned about white fragility, I learned here working with white progressives.
Wow. I mean, this is a couple of years before CHOP and everything, so maybe she was on to something. I don't know.
So, Chapter 1.
Oh my God.
Challenges to talking to white people about racism.
Okay, yeah. Challenges to talking to people about white. Okay. What are the challenges in talking to white people about racism? Like the inherent accusation that they're racist because of their skin color?
All right.
Okay, I'm going to read off the card, even though she'll probably do it just for brevity's sake. Chapter 1, Challenges of Talking to White People About Racism. And there, for those of you listening at home, off to the side, there's a picture of a horse with horse blinders on. Very subtle. Bullet point number 1. We all have opinions, but they can be uninformed. Okay, that is inherently true. Yeah, that can be the case. It doesn't necessarily have to do with racism, but sure, you can have a uninformed opinion or a misinformed notion about something. Sure. Bullet point number 2. We see ourselves as unique individuals unaffected by the culture we live in. Do we all see ourselves that way? And when I'm saying ourselves, I'm assuming she's talking about white people as a demographic. So we also, as unique individuals unaffected by the culture we live in. I think that is a glittering generalization. I know I've been affected by the culture I live in, but I'm trying my best to think and behave the way I want to, and not the way somebody's telling me to necessarily. Unless you want to say, oh, the laws of the land and the government are controlling your actions. Well, you're not doing a very good job of convincing me to vote for one of the other candidates. Bullet point number 3, we think that if we don't see it, it isn't there. We do? Well, what are we talking about? Need more specificity. Oh, well, I can't see racism, so it doesn't exist. Oh, yeah, because I don't know my own history. I don't know history. I didn't know that there was people who are racist, and therefore racism must not be real. Except when you're talking about a book called White Fragility, and then, well, I know racism exists because you're profiting off of it. Thank you, Lancelot652. Spoilers, I think you're still a commie. Yeah. Or at least promoting such things. Bullet point number 4, we use our reactions as a way out. Okay, a way out of... I mean, if you're being accused of racism and I react in a particular way when I'm not actually racist, then I suppose it is an attempt to get a way out of the conversation, because it's like, I don't belong in this conversation because I'm not a racist. Oh, well, you can't say you're not a racist. That's just admitting that you are. What? And lastly, we don't understand racism as a system. Well, I'm not sure you understand racism as a system. You'll have to explain to us how it is a system, because it's an ideology. It is the elevation and or denigration of people or persons on the basis of their skin color. It's an ideology. It's the thought process. So you'll have to explain to me how it's a system. Unless you're talking about the system of upbringing someone into a racist ideology. You're passing on that notion from generation to generation. I guess that could be a system of a kind. Anyway.
I have never met a white person who did not have an opinion on racism. Have you? If you are not sure that all white people have opinions on racism, just bring it up the next time you're around a bunch of white people. Maybe tonight when you have a drink in Ballard after the talk.
Is there anyone in the, let's say, developed world, let's say, regardless of their skin color, if you brought up racism, that they wouldn't have an opinion of it, one way or the other? Whatever that opinion is it inherent to white people that they have an opinion? Like, only white people have an opinion on racism? So black people don't have an opinion on racism. Asian people don't have an opinion on racism. Latino people don't have an opinion on racism. If you bring up the subject, there's no opinion on it based on their skin color. Interesting.
And see how that goes. Not only do we all have opinions.
All? Oh, you mean all white people, right? You're only talking about white people.
But they tend to be very emotionally charged, and that has nothing to do with whether they're informed or not. I have an opinion on virtually everything. That does not make them informed.
Yeah, it also doesn't make someone racist.
I don't believe you can grow up or spend any significant time in the United States without developing opinions on racism. And they will be emotional and strongly held. And
you do not believe it is possible. Belief. So this is an article of faith, is it? Got it.
Again, that has nothing to do with whether they're informed.
It has everything to do with whether they're white.
And in fact, if you are white and you have not devoted years of sustained study, struggle, and focus on this topic, your opinions are necessarily very limited.
Oh, okay. So I'm in a room and I'm looking at two white people. One of them is Robin DiAngelo, and one of them is Robin DiAngelo's twin sister. Okay? Now, they're both wearing the same dress. They're both wearing the same glasses. Physically speaking, they are indistinguishable, but one is Robin DiAngelo and the other one is Diana DiAngelo. Okay? Now, looking at the two of them, I know that one of them has spent their entire career thinking, researching, struggling over the concept of racism. And I know that the other one is a professional seamstress that's never gone to college. By looking at them, which one of them possesses white fragility and an uninformed opinion on race? How do I tell that someone is well-informed on race, which has somehow purged them of some aspect of their inherent sin? I mean, I've got two people look exactly the same. I know that one of them is educated and the other one isn't. How can I tell by looking at them which one I should see as inherently flawed? How do I determine the quality of your thinking on a subject just by looking at you, when the first and most important litmus test for telling whether or not you are a bad person is your skin color and your appearance? How do I parse that out? I would love to have an answer to that question.
And no, a trip to Costa Rica.
What?
Multiracial nieces and nephews. Right?
Right? You have to ask the audience. I don't know. A trip to Costa Rica, was that supposed to cleanse me of my whiteness? Oh, I suppose if I get a tan.
These are not sustained study, struggle, and focus.
Oh.
Now, how can I say that when I don't know most of the people in this room?
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm glad you asked that question. Tell us, how can you tell by looking out in that room to know the quality of one's thinking and or knowledge on a particular subject? Do tell.
And this, of course, is the first thing that tends to trigger white fragility: generalizing about white people.
Yeah, you know what triggers black fragility? Generalizing about black people. You know what triggers Asian fragility? Generalizing about Asian people. You know what triggers Latino fragility? Generalizing about Latino people. Making assessments of people simply on the basis of their race without having any idea about the individual person. Yeah, assessing someone's character or value, quality of life, way of thinking, quality of thinking on the basis of their race. Yeah, it does make people very fragile to be assessed in that way. Or don't you know that?
As a sociologist, I'm really comfortable generalizing about white people.
Okay. Well, she at least admits it, as was mentioned earlier in the chat. Okay, so she's generalizing. She's not talking specifics. She's making assumptions. I mean, hell, I could probably end the stream right there, because everything after this point is just a continued admission of guesswork. But I said an hour and a half at the minimum, so let's continue.
Social life is predictable and patterned, in really observable ways. And
Really? My sister's social life and my social life are predictable and patterned because we're both white, whereas she's outgoing and personable and a go-getter in a lot of ways socially, and I'm more homebody reserved. Our patterns are predictable, you say? Oh, wait, sorry, you're generalizing. So who cares about specifics? Who cares about details when you're dealing with research on people? Who cares?
We've got to grapple with those patterns. But I can say this, that your opinions without sustained study, struggle, focus, mistake making, relationship building, repair, they're superficial because nothing in society gives you the information you need to have more than that.
So you're not a part of society because aren't you writing a whole book to tell people that? I mean, if everybody read your book, they'd be having the, unfiltered distillation of your years of knowledge and research and experience and wisdom. So then wouldn't they be well informed simply by reading your book, or is that not enough? Do they have to buy the next book? How many books do you have?
In fact, you can get through graduate school in this country without ever discussing racism, can you not? You can get...
These days, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know how old this is. This is at least 2 or 3 years old at this point. Maybe more. I don't recall. But I don't know if you could get through a standardized graduate school without running into some kind of social justice, some kind of public health class, some kind of sociology class, some kind of current events class, or whatever, women's studies class, gender studies, without talking about this stuff. I don't think it's avoidable these days at all. At all.
Through teacher education in this country without discussing racism.
Like I say, I'd be surprised if there's any major liberal college in the country right now that does not have either some kind of required course on diversity or some sort of prerequisite for a lot of majors. In fact, I think there's a couple of colleges now that actually require credit hours in some sort of diversity and inclusion or racial studies classes. So might not have been true at the time of this talk, but it's more and more true today.
And if you have if you're in a progressive teacher education program, you'll have one required multicultural education class. But that doesn't mean you'll be talking about racism.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the National Association of Independent Schools, we now have affinity groups. Now, affinity groups aren't racism. They're just, racially segregated educational groups inside of a school. But that's not racism. That's to teach about racism by dividing everybody up by race. And if you'd like to know more about affinity groups in education, you can take a look at my recent video about affinity education from the National Association of Independent Schools. The thumbnail reads, a class by themselves. Take a look. It's disturbing.
You might just be talking about how to introduce ethnic authors in February. Right? You can get through law school. You can get through social work. Right? You can be seen as qualified to lead a major or minor institution in this country, to lead a group of people, to supervise people. You can be seen as qualified to do those things with virtually no ability whatsoever to engage with any complexity or nuance in the issue of racism.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you were someone who just doesn't care about race. Imagine if you were someone who sees skin color on the same level as eye color or hair color, as not any kind of determinative value in a person. Imagine if you were that kind of person. You didn't care about race, you didn't focus on race, it didn't matter to you, etc. How dare you even consider being someone who is in a position of authority? How dare you move through the world and consider yourself a good person? How dare you even leave your house if you don't constantly, consistently, perpetually think about, assess, and see the world through lenses of race? I mean, you'd almost think that somebody that dwells all the time on race and assessing people on the basis of skin color, that might be some sort of counterproductive ideology of, I don't know, racism or something. Maybe. I'm just guessing. I'm sorry, generalizing.
Can you not? All right. So that is the first challenge, humility.
Humility. Understand, you don't know anything. Just understand you have to be humble. Be humble. Don't be defensive. Don't be assertive. Don't walk away. Humble yourself to the accusation. That's the first thing to do. Humble yourself. Kneel. Humble yourself. Thank you, John Seslowski. Does her thinking describe any reality or intends/attempts to materialize it? Live 15 years in SEA and return to all this race talk, so confused. No. Evidence. I mean, she's talking in generalizations about a constructed ideology that she says other people possess simply on the basis of their race. She's admitted that she generalizes about white people. She's not talking specifics. She's imposing a thought process onto people, whether they like it or not, whether they would admit to it or not. And in fact, them not admitting to it, them resisting it, is actually proof that her theory holds true. So she doesn't need evidence. The evidence is in the reaction. Because either you defy the accusation, which is evidence of its existence, or you acquiesce to the reaction, which is evidence of its existence. She can't lose. She's created a game that she cannot lose as someone selling a book of the rules of the game. This is all made up in her head, and people are playing it. And she's the only one winning. It's genius. I gotta say, it is genius thinking. It's not new thinking, certainly. But in the times and the tribulations that we live in, it's genius. Same thing goes along for anti-racism, although I'm pretty sure that Ibram X. Kendi would have loved to have come up with white fragility before he came up with anti-racism. I really do. Point Curation, thank you so much. Assert moral autonomy from villains and heroes. Humble yourself to real life and its harshness, not to other people or their ideologies. Yeah. You'd think. Wouldn't you, though? All right.
The second is individualism. Apparently, white people do not understand socialization.
White people do not understand socialization. Got it.
Because we really think that we are exempt from it.
White people think they are exempt from socialization. Got it.
And of course, the irony of that is because we're socialized to value the individual, we put a lot of effort there. But
wait. How can we be socialized to think or do anything if socialization isn't?
Think that, just because I say I am or want to be, I could be exempt from these forces.
So I'm not exempt because I'm socialized to think I'm exempt from socialization. Okay.
So that is another challenge. And again, generalizing, suggesting race has meaning for white people will often trigger white fragility.
Generalizing, yeah, it often will trigger quote unquote white fragility, which you might as well just called, I don't know, incredulity, apprehension, anger, white fragility. I accuse you of being a terrible person and having terrible thoughts. I say, I don't have those terrible thoughts. You're fragile. You just can't take the truth is the problem. If you could take the truth, you'd be on your knees and confessing to it right now. The fact that you're not just shows how much that you are a racist. Confess that you're a racist. Because I already know that you're a racist because I can see the color of your skin. Yeah, like I say, there's no winning. The only person who wins here is Robin DiAngelo selling her book, her rule book. That's it. She's selling a rule book to a game that has no winners, and everybody's a loser, no matter what, as long as you're white.
We think if we don't see it, it isn't there, and you haven't explained it to me yet enough so that I understand it, so I'm not really sure that could be valid.
Yeah. If you have a theory about how the world works and you present no evidence, you just generalize and make accusations without any kind of justification, you're correct. I am going to doubt it. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. All white people are inherently racist. All white people are inherently fragile, not just like defensive because they're not actually racist when you accuse them of such, but they're fragile. They are flawed. They are psychologically vulnerable and weakened because of their skin color. Yeah, I'm going to need some evidence, not generalizations, not accusations without any kind of basis. Yeah, I'm just white like that, I guess.
And we tend to use our reactions as a way out. There is no way we're going to get where we need to go from a place of white comfort.
What?
And I am comfortable racially virtually 24/7.
You are racially comfortable 24/7? Wow. How did you achieve this state of enlightenment? I mean, you're white.
So that is not my goal, but we will often use that lack of comfort as a sign that something's been done wrong rather than something probably has been done right.
What does that even... I'd be circling word salad now for sure. I mean, I probably could have circled it 3 times over at this point, but after that little bit, definitely.
And that we need to use that as a way in to the deeper framework that would cause such upset rather than use it as a way out.
Okay, maybe I'm just too into this, but I have absolutely no idea what any of that was supposed to mean. None.
And we don't understand racism as a system. So this is another key challenge, which leads me to chapter 2, which is racism and white supremacy.
Racism and white supremacy, because racism can only be white supremacist. All right. Is at any point she going to say that racism can cross any demographic at all? I don't know. Okay, but racism is a system. Okay, tell us about the system.
Racism is a system, not an event.
Racism is a system, not an event. And I can't pronounce the person's name, so I'm not going to try. No, racism is an ideology. Racism is a thought process. You can have laws that effectively enact racism, certainly, but racism is an ideology. Laws that perpetuate it are racist laws. And again, if you're going to go so far as to say, well, the indoctrination of racism could be a system, generation to generation, it's being taught and so on. Sure, maybe, but still, racism itself is an ideology. It's a thought process. It's not a system. But okay, tell us how racism is a system. Not that systems could be racist, but okay.
And it's the system we're in.
Okay.
And none of us could be, and none of us were exempt from its forces.
So you are a part of a racist system right now. Well, you know what? I could believe that because there is definitely an industry right now churning along, making money off of being racist. And you're one of those people.
But the way we're taught to think of racism functions beautifully to not only obscure the system, but to exempt us from its forces.
Okay, obscure the system, exempt us from its forces. Ooh, the invisible hand of racism. All right. Where's the system?
Right, or to have us believe we are exempted from its forces. Now, as a white person, I was raised to be racially illiterate. And
now, that's a phrase that she used in one of the videos I did previously. As a white person, I was raised to be racially illiterate. Racially illiterate. Racially illiterate. Interesting phrase, isn't it? What does it mean? Let's see if she tells us.
And I actually think all white people are raised to be racially illiterate.
You think all white people are raised to be racially illiterate. Okay, well, you have to define what racial literacy means first before I have any idea of whether or not all white people are raised that way, which, we're generalizing.
In this culture. And in gaining racial literacy.
What is racial literacy? Define your terms, doctor.
I have had to understand not just the collective dynamics and dimensions of racism, but how racism impacts different groups who are perceived and defined as people of color, how it impacts them differently.
So intersectionality, that kind of thing.
Right. So not all peoples of color experience racism differently. The things I've internalized about different groups is different.
The things you've internalized about different groups is different. So you are projecting. You're generalizing and you're projecting. Okay.
Where and how they are positioned always in relation to whiteness or far away from whiteness, and how that manifests, right? All of that must be understood.
Why do you keep saying right? Why are you asking the audience for validation? Aren't you the expert? Don't you know? I know it's a nervous tick. It doesn't necessarily mean that inherently, but I always find it interesting when someone stands up on a stage, purports themselves to be an expert on something, and constantly feels they have to have a filler moment of asking the question right, as though they need the audience to agree to perpetuate them along. And in her case, she probably does because, you know, if people weren't buying her book, she wouldn't have any kind of career.
But after a good 20 plus years of talking day in and day out to white people about racism, I feel very confident to say that there is something profoundly anti-Black in this culture.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to pause here for a second. About 5 minutes coming up, a little less now, to an hour and a half. Do you guys want me to continue? Is this enough? I mean, I'm willing to go on another 15 minutes, maybe up to the 2-hour mark or something. But do you want to know more? Would you like me to continue? If you'd like me to continue, put a 1 in the chat. If you think this is enough, put a 2. I'm on the fence myself. I think we've got the core of her argument, if you want to call it that. So let's see. I got 1 from Brittany Holland, 1 from Lexi, 1 from Ecto, 1 from Joe. That servant of Satania, 1. Avi says 2. John Sislowski says 1. Johnny Stoffel says 1. Chaos X says 1. Straight Sit Mail says, yeah, man, 1, 1. Okay, guys, I'll go for a minimum of another 15 minutes, or at least up to the 45 mark on the hour. And then I'll reassess and we'll see where we're at. Okay, let's continue. Oh, and thank you, Point Curation. The world needs to know about white fragility. 1. I mean, like I said, that's why I'm doing this. I have never actually listened to an examination of the argument, and there's no better place. And I think the best place is to get it from the author themselves. So, just like Ibram X. Kendi week before, let's do this one. And you know, if there's, and I don't know all the books out there, if there is a book or some kind of zeitgeist guide to something about what's going on in our society today, and you think it'd be interesting to take a look at that, and I'm not aware of it, let me know. Tweet me a link or something to a book or to an author. And if I can find an author speaking about that book, and it's, you know, part of this milieu of either racial or social or sexual tension going on these days, maybe that'll be a Sunday stream for another day.
And that nothing seems to turn white people's cranks of resentment, like thinking Black people got something over on us that they didn't deserve. And the deeper belief is that they're inherently undeserving.
White people all possess that belief. Got it.
I believe in the white mind, Black people are the ultimate racial other.
You believe in the white mind that Black people are the racial other. The white mind. Got it.
Right? And that there are these bookends. And again, your perceived proximity to each end of that impacts how you're going to experience your racialization. So having said that, and not really having time to do history.
Not having time to do history. So not having time to present any kind of evidence or justification for what you just said. That's convenient. Okay.
I just want to give you one glance at the trajectory of anti-Blackness in this country since its beginning.
Okay, let's go. What is one trajectory? Is it going to be slavery? Is it going to be Jim Crow? Is it going to be just the general lack of civil rights laws up through the 60s? Is it going to be a recent police shooting, or at least recent to that time? What do you think?
And this slide will be deliberately dense.
Well, if the slide isn't, you in fact may be.
We can literally think about it as state-sanctioned organized crime.
State-sanctioned discrimination against African Americans, or AFAM as she's shortened it there. She couldn't just roll it over to the next line. State-sanctioned discrimination. Okay, so you mean like Jim Crow laws, like redlining, like slavery, like a whole bunch of things that are defunct and no longer in action, right? Or is there something else going on? Thank you, John Miller. Kendi is a piece of work, actually believes that Caucasian people were from outer space. Listening to him on that speech the other day was quite a trip. And honestly, if anybody who wants to understand the concept behind anti-racism, which is a new concept, or at least a very popular one, has its own guidebook and everything, I really recommend going and watching that stream. Because again, just like this one, you get it straight from the source as to how it's supposed to work. And thankfully, that guy was asked direct questions about the definitions of his terms. And when he gives them, he really tells you all you need to know. But I'll let you figure that out for yourself, or just watch the original thing. Don't even look at my commentary. Just watch the original broadcast or the original stream. The link is in the description of my video. You don't even need to listen to me. Just watch and listen. Watch what he says. Watch what he says. Listen to what he says, and think about what the implications are.
But at least discrimination against African Americans from the beginning.
State-sanctioned discrimination against African Americans, kidnapping and 300 years of enslavement, torture, rape, and brutality, medical experimentation, black codes, sharecropping, bans on testifying against whites, mandatory segregation, bans on black jury service and voting, lynchings and mob violence, imprisoning people for unpaid work, bans on interracial marriage, redlining to profit realtors and bankers, employment discrimination, educational discrimination, biased laws and policing practices, white flight, subprime mortgages, mass incarceration, school to prison pipeline, disproportionate special ed referrals and punishments, testing/tracking/school funding, biased media representation, historical omissions, and ... Wow, that's a lot of stuff. And I think up through, let's say, the point at which we get to white flight, because that's still kind of an abstraction, everything prior to white flight is now effectively defunct by law. And everything else is assumptions and conspiracy theories. So, yeah.
And it starts with kidnapping and 300 years of enslavement, torture, rape, and brutality, and it carries on. And about a quarter of the way in, you see bans on testifying against whites, which made it technically legal to murder black people in this country.
And that is obviously still in action and still on the law books, right? Thank you, Kip Fox Kip. Here's for some of the headache medicine you need after this. Oh boy. Yeah, I need some medicine. And that medicine is a pepper jack. Pepper jack.
And you are now in my lifetime.
Yes. I mean, it wasn't that long ago in glacial movement that this country had inherently racist laws. It's true. And then we dispelled with them. And racism as a legal construct is one of the most detestable things in the world right now. Even back when this talk took place, I think there was plenty of evidence to show that even the hint of racism practiced by the state or an agent of the state is a detestable notion to most people. But I guess that's not true because things used to be bad.
And I'm going to say it again because, again, a lot of white people seem to think it ended a long time ago. We're in my lifetime about a quarter of the way through that slide.
Well, you're kind of old. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I mean, it's not, look, the fact that those things have been routed out of the law is not saying that they never happened. It's an acknowledgement that they did. It's an acknowledgement that they were wrong. Outlawing discrimination by state authorities, by businesses, etc., and so forth, is an admission that we used to do it wrong. It's not an erasure of history. It's an acknowledgement of history. And it is a promise, as best as we can do as a society, to try to work towards a better country and a better society. It doesn't eliminate bad thoughts. It disincentivizes bad actions as best as we can. I don't know what else to say. I don't know why people seem to think, oh, well, because this happened, you must think that it never happened. No, I know it happened. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a law for it. We wouldn't acknowledge that it's bad. Their laws are an admission of human weakness, human fallibility, and us as a society agreeing that there is a more correct way for us to behave towards one another. Not that that behavior is eliminated, doesn't happen, otherwise we wouldn't need the law. But yes, I'm sure some of these things were in practice in your lifetime. Can you acknowledge that they are no longer?
And then we see about 2/3 of the way through employment discrimination, and we are in 2018 with copious empirical evidence.
Really? Copious empirical evidence? Well, I'll tell you what, if you've got it, call the ACLU. Call the authorities. They are breaking federal law. Tell me, oh, tell me true of these examples.
Right, so let's pick it up there.
Yeah, please do. Give me some examples of 2018, where I guess this is taking, when this is taking place. Give me some 2018 examples of employment discrimination on the basis of race. Tell me. I mean, in America, in a place that has laws against that. Tell me.
Employment discrimination, educational discrimination, biased laws and policing practices, white flight, subprime mortgages, mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, disproportionate special ed referrals and punishments, testing, tracking, school funding, biased media representation, historical omissions, and so much more.
The subprime mortgage crisis only affected Black people. Discrimination in schools only affects Black people. Never mind affinity groups that are taking place today. The school to prison pipeline is a conspiracy theory that every time I've ever examined the arguments for it, it falls apart immediately, because getting in trouble in school is not an inherent determinative that you will end up as a career criminal. But they want to tell you that it's somebody else's fault than the individual's choices. They want to tell you it's somebody else's fault than the parents who might have had a role to play in how that child developed, regardless of what school they went to. No. The system is putting people into jail from the cradle. Okay.
It is a system, not an event.
Because you say so?
It's the system we're in, and none of us could be, and none of us were exempt from its forces.
Except you, I guess?
We want to be unique and special individuals, then we need to figure out how whatever we see as special and different about us set us up into that system.
How what is special about me set me up into that system? So if someone possesses something, quote unquote, special, it's not an element of my own inborn talent or effort on my part to learn a trade or a craft or my imagination. If there's something I consider unique about me, it set me up into that system. The system didn't do it. My unique qualities. Okay, I'm confused.
Because it did.
Okay.
So I'm talking, I know white people really well. I'm talking X.
You know white people really well, huh? Boy, oh boy, do you. It's like I'm looking into a mirror when you talk about white people.
And you're like, I was Y.
Yes, actually, let me back up slightly, just a couple seconds here.
A lot of white people seem to think it ended a long time ago. We're in my lifetime.
Okay, hold on. I backed up too much. I don't need to hear the litany again. Can I move forward a little bit?
discrimination, biased laws and policing
Apparently not.
practices, white flight,
Yeah, yeah,
subprime
yeah.
mortgages,
Yep.
mass incarceration,
Yep.
the school-to-prison pipeline,
Yep.
disproportionate special ed referrals
Yep.
and punishments,
Mhm.
testing, tracking, school funding, biased media representation, historical omissions, and so much more. It is a system, not an event. It's the system we're in, and none of us could be, and none of us were exempt from its forces.
Right.
We want to be unique and special individuals, then we need to figure out how whatever we see as special and different about us set us up into that system.
I need to figure out how my specialness set me up into a system of racism. I need to figure that out.
Because it did. So I'm talking, I know white people really well. I'm talking X, and you're like, ha, I was Y.
Yes. You make an accusation that this is how all white people behave, and someone can demonstrate how that is not true of them, and then...
Right? Okay, you were Y, most whites are X. How did Y set you up?
What?
It did.
Most whites are X, you're Y. Okay, how did Y set you up? It did. So even if I stand, just hypothetically, if I stand in stark contrast to your accusations, generalizations, and assumptions about white people, the very fact that I am in contrast to those things is proof that I'm still a part of the racist system. It is a rule book for a game where only she wins. And there are no winning moves. You are doomed if you're white. Nothing you can do, nothing you can say, nothing that you've been, nothing that you could be will defy the rule that you are white and you are guilty and you are complicit and you are flawed. She's telling us the rules for a game only she wins in her pocketbook.
Right? The question is not if, it's how.
Oh, so don't question the legitimacy, just question the method. Got it.
I'm going to repeat it. It's a system, not an event.
Is this a mantra? You want me to say it over and over again till I believe it, till it's part of my ingrained thought process? Huh. Sounds a little culty.
And how do we cope with the moral trauma of what I just read to you?
How do we cope with the moral trauma of white racism? Okay, I think I'm going to have to go to the top of the hour, guys. And I'm going to call a hard stop there. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this at about 5 minutes till the top of the hour, take a couple of questions from you guys if you have anything to say, and then wrap this up. I don't want it to go too long, and I think we've got plenty here to deal with. And the link to the full deal, the full presentation is in the description below. So if you are interested in knowing more after this and listening to more, you can find it there.
Resmaa Menakem has a beautiful book, My Grandmother's Hands, where he talks about racial trauma. There's a trauma, I believe, to white people of racism, but I don't think it's a moral trauma.
You believe it is a moral trauma. Okay, define for me a moral trauma.
Right? And it's a piece of white fragility, not being able to face our complicity in this system.
Not being able to face our complicity, our inherent complicity, our unavoidable complicity, even if we don't fall into the X category, but are a Y category, we're still complicit because our Y attributes actually lend themselves to proving white fragility and racist systems. Right, got it.
Well, historically, we projected our sins onto the black body. Right?
Why you keep asking the audience for validation, right?
Lazy, shiftless, criminal. We projected our sins onto the black body.
We did these things. We did. Got it.
Today, in addition to doing that, we obscure the system of racism that we uphold and we exempt ourselves from its forces.
I'm sorry, I keep pausing when she's saying right. The end of every sentence is followed by a right. Question mark.
And we do this in a way that appears to be progressive, right? That race doesn't matter to us.
But as we know, all white progressives are actually racist. Okay, and then for those of you watching at home, and she might describe this in a second, there is a screenshot, and I don't know if it's going to play, of the Jeopardy board from the game Jeopardy, the game show. And there's a column that says African American history, and it is completely full. It hasn't been touched yet by the contestants, which obviously means that all the contestants are racist, because maybe African American history isn't their forte, which makes them racist. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. That's a lot of thinking and feeling for a flips page. Oh, right. Yeah. Sociologist. Yeah.
This is the board after the grand champion college Jeopardy round, right?
Right.
And for me, it just speaks volumes.
Doesn't it, though? One picture speaks volumes to you about what?
Right. Not again, knowing our history and being able to trace it into the present is one of the volumes it speaks. Another one is that is the history of this country.
African American history, a column on Jeopardy, untouched at that point in the show, and I've got no context, but she can read the tea leaves, and that's exemplative of a racist society. Got it.
It is not their history. It didn't happen in a vacuum. So one of the aspects of...
So why do they call it African American history? Why don't they just call it American history? Why do they divvy these things up on the basis of race? I'm fine making it all American history, not setting aside a special category for it. Why divvy it up on the basis of race in the first place? African American history. Is there an Asian American history class? Is there a Latino American history class? Why can't it just be part of American history? Why have a separate category? Is it somehow not American history exclusively if we put it into an African American category? I've never quite understood that. Why split it up that way? Why not just tell American history and not differentiate by the skin color of the actors involved? Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. 3 people don't know a thing. Racism confirmed. Yeah. Yeah. Or there was some strategic advantage to that. Or I don't even know. I don't even know the context for that photograph, but okay. Maybe they weren't well versed on it. Maybe it intimidated them because it wasn't something that they were familiar with, or they didn't know what they were getting into. I don't know.
Of institutional power is the ability to disseminate your worldview to everyone, to position it as objective and universal.
Oh, like you're doing right now? You're standing up on a stage telling everybody how reality works by your generalizations and your beliefs. That kind of power?
Right. And to tell the story, right? The story of the other when we are not in relationship with the other.
Aren't you making white people the other here, though?
Right. So I want to give you an example of the power of the story.
Oh, please.
And I want to do it through the Jackie Robinson story.
Oh, okay.
You all know Jackie Robinson?
Yeah, I know who he was. So you're going to take a story about a guy whose actions actually overcome at that time, far more racist society than we have today. So are you just going to take a historical incident of overt and undeniable racism and equate it to now and white people today, like you've done with everything else you've brought up so far? Gosh, color me shocked.
Right? So Jackie Robinson has been quite celebrated for doing something. What's the tagline that goes with Jackie Robinson? He broke the color line.
Uh-huh. Right.
Now, so let's do a little discourse analysis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do discourse analysis. Okay, let's go.
Because every year on the anniversary, we celebrate him breaking the color line.
Uh-huh.
So think about what that invokes, right?
I keep cutting her off at her rights. I really want her rights to be recorded into history. Think about what that invokes. Okay, I'm thinking about it really hard. If I think about it a little harder, can I divest myself of my white fragility? I'm thinking really hard, Robin, I swear.
Right? He was exceptional. He was special. He did it.
Does his specialness contribute to a racist system? Does what makes him unique contribute to a racist system? I mean, oh, wait, he's not white. Right. Thank you, McCall, Driving 8-Man. Technically, the Zoot Suit riots broke the color line. Zoot Suit riot, riot, throw back a bottle of beer. Oh, yeah, the Zoot Suit riots. I thought about that, yeah.
Finally, one of them had what it took to break through and play with us.
Yes.
Up until him, nobody had what it took.
Right.
So subtext, inferior group.
Wow, thanks for that revelation. In the olden days, black people were seen as inferior. Wow. Are you telling me something new here? The subtext is, boy, oh boy, are you a teacher?
Right? But he did it. And of course, the day he did it, the day he broke the color line, racism in sports ended.
Yes, that's what everybody believes. Wow, you know white people so well.
So imagine if we told a story like this. Jackie Robinson, the first black man that whites allowed to play Major League Baseball.
Yes, that is how it was. Do you think that any reasonable person, knowing the context of history at that time, would disagree with that phrasing of it? Thank you, Corey Suzuki. Scribe wants her rights revoked. No. I love her rights. Every time that she asks right, I know that she's not even confident enough in her own nonsense to just state it without pause. And that's comforting to me to a certain extent. That tells me that she's at least got a little bit somewhere in her that doubts herself and the truth, quote unquote, of what she's saying. And that's comforting.
And I want you to notice the difference in that story. One, that's the truth. It didn't matter how exceptional he was, and I actually don't believe he was the first most exceptional.
Oh, really? Okay.
But if we...
Have you seen Jackie Robinson's record as compared to his white counterparts at that time? Have you? Okay.
He didn't say he could play, he couldn't play. If he walked out onto that field before we said you can walk out on the field, the police would have removed him.
You're right. And that means we've come a long freaking way since the days of Jackie Robinson, haven't we? Can you admit to our evolution as a society? Or are you going to continue dwelling on the past and projecting those values, thoughts, and ideals onto people today? I have a feeling it's going to be the latter.
It wasn't up to him, right? Now, the reason I want us to tell the story the second way is, one, because it's true, and two, because I need role models.
What?
Right? How did white people get organized? What did they do behind the scene? What barriers did they face? What challenges, right? What strategies did they use? And could we use any of those today and adapt any of those today?
Okay. And on that completely bewildering note, I'm going to stop here. I've had enough. For now, I don't think I'll be doing a part 2, but you never know. I will... we are at 23:35 in my copy of the presentation. My copy is slightly truncated from the original. I took out the introduction and stuff like that, so it's going to vary if you go watch the original. But for my reference, 2335. If I decide to come back to this at some point, that's where we'll start. But now, guys, if you have any questions, comments, or anything else, let me know in the chat. I'll take a couple minutes here to get your feedback. And then I'm going to go have some lunch because I'm hungry. Let's see. Advocatus Diaboli. Wow, she is giving white people all the credit for Jackie Robinson. I guess, sort of, kind of. He wasn't that talented, just that white people let him on the field. And so by contrast, he just was the best black player because he was the only one. Let's not look at his record as compared to his white counterparts at that time. You know, that doesn't mean anything, I guess. John Miller, this hurt for the few minutes I listened to. It was, I mean, at this point, it didn't really come across to me as anything new, but it was interesting to hear it from the source. Like I say, I think I want to do more of this where I find like whatever the current thinking is from a particular book, publication, whatever else, and see if I can find something from the author giving us the unfiltered, unreinterpreted version of events. So I can know without having somebody else tell me what the truth of the matter is. Jesse Teller, this was rough. Thank you for struggling through Scribelight and chat. Well, thank you, Jesse, for joining us. BG, Scribelight, what is your to get through this? I hope it was a stiff one. Now, I have a stiff one, but moving on. Brittany Holland, nice job, Scribe. I appreciate hearing you go through this. Well, thank you for joining me. Let's see, Annalyn, Scribelight. So if racism is inevitable, is it wrong? Well, I mean, if everybody possesses it, if everybody thinks it, if everybody practices it, then racism is normalized and it's an inherent evil to everyone and it has to be purged. You might almost call it original sin. So someone can stand on a book and say that they know better than everybody else, which of course isn't any kind of power play. Yeah. Let's see. Saiyan Wizard. Again, there were much better black players to choose from. There may have been. As far as like was he a good player? I don't care about his skin color. Was Jackie Robinson a good player? How did his record line up against his compatriots at the time? There are probably a lot of really good baseball players, basketball players, football players out there right now who will never get a shot at the NFL. And if by luck they did, they'd probably shine. Does that somehow diminish the achievement of somebody who does make it? I'm not sure. Bluntly Blondie. Good Lord. Bluntly Blondie. I'm so mad. I looked at the sky and there were no clouds. Yeah, you can get mad about anything. You can be angry about whatever. Especially if you're white. Let's see. Thank you, Matt Barnes. If we crucify her, will we be absolved of the sin of racism? Nope. Sorry. Even that didn't absolve everyone of their original sin. Sorry. You know, even in the story, he died for our sins. You still have to go to church every Sunday. Doesn't actually absolve you of anything, which is kind of the counterintuitive notion of the whole deal. And Prosaic Dreams in Blue, he was arguably as good as Babe Ruth. Yeah. And again, there may have been a black player out there who was a million times better than Babe Ruth that never got a shot because he was black. It's entirely possible. Does that mean that Jackie Robinson wasn't worthwhile or something? I don't know what that means. Same thing today. There's plenty of people out there who are talented, and if they just had a shot, things would go their way. And if they don't, they don't, because that's how life works. And doesn't diminish the people that make it necessarily. Doesn't necessarily diminish the people that don't. It's just life. Let's see. Anything else before I move on? Bluntly says, about to eat myself into the sun. Oh, don't do that. That'd be painful. But on that note of pain, guys, which this might have been for you and was slightly a bit for me, we're going to wrap this up. So I hope you found this informative. I know that I did. Like I say, hearing it directly from the source, I think, is the best way to go with these things. If you can think of any books of note that are going on these days or very popular that you think would be interesting to look at, please send me a tweet telling me about the book and or the author, and I'll see if I can find them talking about the book or giving readings from it, and we can do that in the future maybe. If you would like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents or the Ranting Monkey, you can find all three of us tomorrow night, Monday night on Satsu 2 Cents' channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will go over the news of the day, news stories that you submit, what we've been up to on the intertubes, and then your questions and comments. Everyone, thank you so much for your attendance today. Thank you so much for your participation. And thank you for those of you that donated. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really do appreciate it. It'll all go towards horrible things I'll put in my body, like goldfish crackers and Jack Daniels. Until next time, guys, I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter, and look out for the next TED Excellence or other video that I might put out. And hope to see you there. Until then, guys, take care. Bye-bye.